Warrior Number 6, codenamed Sentuin Rokugu, works under the command of the Kisaragi Corporation, a notorious villain organization specializing in invasion campaigns targeting planets with favorable living conditions, serving their ambition for inter-universal domination. Despite bearing the title of an elite warrior, Rokugu personally shows little interest in the organization's ideals. For him, most of his time at headquarters revolves around teasing the two most powerful female leaders, Supreme Leader Astaroth and Supreme Leader Belil, rather than focusing on training or missions. When a new planetary exploration project with an Earth-like environment was launched, genius scientist Lilith directly headed the campaign. Her greatest achievement was the completion of an interplanetary teleportation device, an unprecedented modern technological marvel. For this mission, Rokugu was designated as the first person to cross dimensional space to survey the target planet. Supporting him is Alice Kisaragi, an android with the appearance of a charming young girl, but actually housing an extremely powerful nuclear bomb in her body, capable of causing genocidal disaster if seriously damaged. Though programmed to monitor and assist, Alice always maintains a condescending attitude, frequently criticizing Rokugu as useless, while he views her as a walking piece of metal, sometimes not even bothering to hide his contempt. Before departure, Rokugu hoped to be sent off with a warm embrace from Supreme Leader Astaroth. But what awaited him instead was a flying kick from her. Both were placed in the teleportation chamber by Lilith, who had never had the opportunity to test the device under real conditions. Upon learning he was playing the role of a guinea pig, Rokugu panicked, screaming protests in vain. Nevertheless, the teleportation succeeded, though both landed on the planet in an uncontrolled free fall. While Rokugu had to activate an emergency parachute to save his life, Alice simply fell straight to the ground as she had no features beyond self-destruct mode when damaged. After a less than gentle landing, they discovered an ancient city near their access point and chose that location to build their base. However, Alice informed him that it would take at least 30 days for the spatial structure to stabilize before a teleportation gate back could be opened. To help Rokugu adapt to the new environment, she injected him with nanobots that would immunize him against native pathogens. According to Kisaragi's operational regulations, to summon weapons from Earth, agents must accumulate evil points, a type of energy obtained by performing evil acts. However, Rokugu's mischievous antics only earned enough points to summon trivial items, like suggestive comic books, much to his frustration. Before they could fully understand the situation, both were suddenly attacked by a herd of four-legged monsters. Rokugu immediately drew his gun to fight, while Alice sat calmly as if watching a performance. Despite being annoyed by her indifferent attitude, he used all his accumulated points to summon a long-range gun for her. Seeing no other option, Alice reluctantly joined the battle. Together they repelled the monsters just as a female knight appeared, Snow, the leader of the Royal Guard of the Kingdom of Grace. To maintain their cover, Alice quickly fabricated a dramatic story, describing Rokugu as a hero who had sacrificed himself to save people, but suffered mental confusion due to trauma. Moved by this tragic fate, Snow led them both back to the capital, introducing them as trustworthy warriors. At the royal residence, Rokugu encountered an old tank displayed in the exhibition area. According to the description, this was a vehicle that once helped the kingdom overcome a monster disaster many years ago. They were then taken to the royal palace to meet Princess Tilly's Centauria. The moment he saw her, Rokugu's perverted nature emerged, making Snow firmly believe that his mind had serious issues. Tilly's revealed that the demon race's territory was increasingly becoming desertified by an ancient being called the Sand King, forcing them to encroach on human lands. With weakened defense forces, Tilly's hoped both would assist in the battle. At this point, Rokugu and Alice realized that Snow was actually just trying to use them to score personal points, as she was always obsessed with rank and rewards. While walking around the palace garden, they saw a cube-shaped device called the Raincaller, a legacy of advanced technology that no longer functioned. Recognizing it as an advanced machine, Alice proceeded to repair it. Snow appeared full of hope, as if the machine worked again, she would receive a worthy reward. When it came to entering the activation code, Rokugu deliberately set the password as a phrase related to a scantily clad festival, intending to create an awkward situation for the princess during the inauguration. However, just as the prank was being discussed, Tilly's appeared behind them and heard everything. As a result, both were imprisoned for their inappropriate behavior. Thanks to their significant contribution in restoring the Raincaller, they were pardoned. Tilly's then asked her father's permission to keep the two to serve in the royal court. The Grace King, who doted on his daughter, immediately agreed. Snow, despite vehement objections, was forced to keep her promise to take responsibility if anything happened with the Raincaller, making her accept the continued presence of the two troublemakers at court. Meanwhile, Rokugu secretly smiled with satisfaction at having won in a way no one expected. After witnessing Sentuin Rokugu's capabilities, Tilly's Centauria allowed him to establish an elite special forces team under his direct command. However, due to the prolonged and brutal war with the demon race, the Kingdom of Grace's current forces were nearly depleted, with most young men already at the front lines, leaving the home front with elderly people near death and untrained girls. In such severe personnel shortage, Alice Kisaragi, with her extremely accurate strategic analysis and combat assessment abilities, selected the two most promising individuals from the few remaining. The first was Rose, a little girl with the strange ability to absorb the power of other beings by eating their flesh. Although this power was terrifying, her childish, food-loving personality inadvertently made it easy for Rokugu to tame her. The other was Grim, a wheelchair-bound sorceress with the power to curse anyone she wished. Grim was naturally careless and mysterious, yet upon first meeting Rokugu, she actively flirted with him, hoping to make him interested. Unexpectedly, he responded enthusiastically without hesitation, making Grim blush with embarrassment, as no one had ever dared to look at her directly like that before, and he had even accidentally seen her underwear when she was careless. As a result, she cried and made him take responsibility, beginning a strange bond between two very unusual people. Before the force could stabilize, Rokugu clashed with Snow, the female captain of the Royal Guard, over command authority. The two decided to settle it with a public duel, and after using a thigh-squeezing technique he had practiced for many years, Rokugu emerged victorious. Furious, Snow demanded that her opponent be cut into pieces, but Tilly's intervened in time, preventing an unfortunate outcome. A few days later, Rokugu's group entered their first real battle. Instead of applying tactics, the Grace army simply charged straight into the enemy camp without calculation, making Rokugu both amused and dismayed. He quickly proposed changing the attack direction to target the demon army's logistics, because no matter how strong the enemy forces were, they would still weaken without supplies. The new plan was implemented, and he and Alice led a raid on the enemy's rear using familiar dirty tactics, causing the entire logistics team to flee in panic. Rose then used fire to burn all the supply warehouses, delivering a heavy blow to the enemy forces. Just when victory seemed certain, one of the four heavenly kings under the demon Lord Hein appeared and suddenly challenged them. Unlike the serious reactions of others, Rokugu wasn't worried at all and calmly took out his camera to photograph the confrontation as if he were on vacation. Hearing Hein's temptation that joining the demon side would bring high rewards, he didn't hesitate to express his intention to switch sides, ensuring that Tilly's would never dare give him a command position again. Despite saying this, when Hein withdrew, leaving the soldiers to be handled by Guradagan, another of the four heavenly kings, the situation became chaotic. Guradagan didn't hesitate to launch a heavy attack, shattering Grim's head right in front of her comrades, leaving everyone stunned. Snow angrily charged forward to fiercely attack in revenge for her friend, while Alice held off the opponent to protect the rear. However, at that moment, Guradagan suddenly received an urgent order and withdrew immediately afterward, leaving the battlefield atmosphere filled with sorrow. Rokugu was completely devastated, believing that Grim had truly vanished from this world. But Snow later revealed that Grim carried monster bloodlines and was also a follower of the deity Generation, the god who holds life and death. If a sacrifice ritual was performed, she could be reborn. After the ceremony was conducted, everyone gradually left, leaving only Rokugu silently keeping vigil beside Grim's body. Not long after, she surprisingly regained consciousness, extremely astonished to learn that someone who was always seen as a living tool meant only to self-destruct in battle was actually cared for by someone. She expressed her desire to go on a date, and Rokugu immediately agreed without thinking. Thus, the two began a one-of-a-kind date not to exchange love, but to sabotage couples in love throughout the city. During this occasion, Rokugu learned that if Grim's curse on someone failed, the reaction would immediately bounce back onto her body, causing serious injury. That's why Grim's legs could never function normally, forever confined to that wheelchair as the price she paid for curse powers beyond human limits. Thanks to his plan to strike the rear lines and cut off food supplies to the demon side, Sentuin Rokugu forced the entire demon race army to withdraw from the battlefield quickly. However, upon returning to the royal palace, most of the Kingdom of Grace's officials expressed doubt, claiming that Rokugu and his teammates were merely lucky and unworthy of significant rewards. In contrast to this sarcastic attitude, Rokugu maintained his usual calmness, coldly refuting the nobles by presenting specific evidence confirming that his group was indeed the reason for the enemy's retreat. His firm stance greatly pleased the king and Tilly's Centauria, who even called him a legendary hero, one who would bear a sacred mark when the world faced the threat of the demon lord. Rokugu immediately showed a strange sign that had appeared on his hand. Believing himself to be the chosen one, but Tilly's quickly revealed that it was merely an insect bite. Unable to contain his anger, he immediately panicked and screamed for help, while Tilly smiled coldly, adding that the true heir to the mark was her royal brother, so he should abandon his heroic dreams. Just after leaving the palace, Rokugu encountered Rose trembling before Alice Kisaragi's gaze. Well aware of Rose's ability to absorb genetic code from any being she had eaten, Alice decided to force her to eat a rare insect, known for its extraordinary power. Rose was terrified, not daring to touch the disgusting creature, while Rokugu held her tightly so Alice could perform the power transfer ritual, even encouraging her to eat quickly for faster results, threatening to catch more if it wasn't enough. This mental torture drove Rose to desperation. When investigating why someone with such a rare ability would submit to serving in the army instead of living freely elsewhere, Rokugu discovered she had been found in ancient ruins, with faint memories only preserving the image of her grandfather who had created her using a miraculous stone that could materialize any wish. However, during his research, he accidentally touched forbidden arcane magic and lost his life. The army promised to give her answers about that stone, so she agreed to serve. Clearly seeing the deception, Rokugu immediately began ideological enlightenment, with Alice joining in, leaving Rose no choice but to join their unstable team. Back in the resting quarters, Rokugu began lamenting that he still hadn't attracted any beautiful women, despite having decent looks, abundant strength, and having just rendered great service to the kingdom. Just as he was arguing with Alice about matters of romance, Snow suddenly appeared and announced they had to attend a war strategy meeting. At the conference, the generals assessed the situation as extremely difficult, with all hero groups having failed to capture a demon tower of special strategic importance. The nobles sought to shirk responsibility, quickly designating Rokugu to undertake this dangerous mission. Without evasion, he proposed a surprise plan to seize the first floor and then use smoke to fumigate the enemy troops like termites, taking advantage of the tower's spiral architecture to burn everything. However, the officers rejected this, claiming the method was too dirty and contrary to heroic dignity. The next morning, while the Grace Army launched a general offensive, Rokugu refused to join the battle, recognizing that direct attacks would only lead to defeat as his side was too weak and unwilling to use their heads. Snow angrily called him a coward, then left to fight alone. By evening, the battle was still ongoing, with Snow returning exhausted. At the same time, Grim, who had just dreamed of a strange scene between Rokugu and Tilly's, was awakened in panic. Taking advantage of the chaos, Rokugu used a nail gun to climb the tower via the outer wall. Midway, Snow was nearly exhausted from having used all her strength in the previous battle. With no other option, Rokugu had to carry her on his back, filled with joy as their bodies pressed together, especially feeling her substantial chest pressed against his back. Upon reaching the tower's peak, the small group stealthily approached two enemy commanders, Goathead and Bullhorn, from behind. While those two were busy celebrating their victory, Rokugu suddenly appeared, kicking Goathead off the top, then threatening Bullhorn to stay still unless he wanted his comrade thrown next. After several shameless moves, he had someone throw stones at Bullhorn's head until he passed out, then used Goathead's body as an exchange item, demanding Bullhorn ransom his friend with treasure. The victory ended with sighs of exasperation from allies, and the team returned to the city with a reward of a massive bag of gold from Snow spoils she owed him from 2 previous achievements. Upon learning this money was enough for a family to live comfortably for an entire year, Rokugu decided to quit his job as a Kisaragi agent, retire completely, and live in grace as a high-class citizen, enjoying a leisurely life without concerns for danger. Shortly after participating in the raid on the central tower controlled by enemy forces, Sentuin, Rokugu, and Snow were unexpectedly publicly commended by the commander-in-chief of the Kisaragi forces in front of the entire army for bringing about a pivotal victory. However, before they could enjoy the feeling of glory after this rare achievement, both were immediately assigned another mission many times more dangerous, directly confronting the upcoming attack of an army commanded by Hein. Although Rokugu was somewhat suspicious, as this plan was initiated by the cunning chief of staff, who was notorious for always finding ways to push him into desperate situations, he still accepted, partly because he didn't want to disappoint Snow. She was full of hope that if they completed the mission excellently, their rewards and path to advancement would exceed all expectations. The counterattack formation was deployed swiftly, with all logistics completed to prepare for confronting the forces from the demon realm. Rokugu fully understood that his role in the campaign was merely a pawn pushed to the front lines to take hits for those sitting comfortably behind. Recognizing the potential for massive casualties, Alice Kisaragi secretly proposed that the entire team should only fight symbolically and then quickly withdraw to minimize unnecessary losses. Meanwhile, the battlefield gradually became engulfed in thick dust. Then suddenly a giant golem made entirely of boulders appeared, a strategic weapon deployed by Hein to the battlefield as an overwhelming first strike to crush the enemy's morale. As soon as the deformed creature appeared, the Grace army, in panic, immediately fled, leaving the battle line for Rokugu's group to handle. No one else wanted to risk their lives confronting that giant monster. All made excuses to shirk responsibility. With no other choice, Rokugu had to face it alone, launching a first strike with a direct punch to the golem's outer layer, causing his entire arm to go numb as if he had just hit a metal wall. Not giving up, he continued kicking at the creature's legs. However, this action immediately caused his body to be pinned to the ground by the giant stone hands as if he were nothing more than an insect. Forced into a corner, he had to remove all physical limitations to release his highest level of sealed power. At that moment, Alice charged straight into the battle line, attached a heavy energy bomb to the golem and detonated it, causing the monster to explode violently, with fragments flying all over the battlefield. Although they eliminated the main threat, the price was that Rokugu lost his ability to move for 3 minutes because he had released all his body's potential. He quickly asked his teammates to hold position and protect him from counterattacks during this critical time. The situation became even more intense when Hein personally appeared and joined the battle, using magic to suppress the entire team with superior firepower. Snow fell into crisis upon discovering that her newly purchased sword had completely melted under the enemy's magical effects. She screamed in anger, making everyone almost embarrassed by the absurdity. Rokugu tried to stop her, signaling to keep quiet to avoid drawing attention. But Snow's chaotic reaction caused Hein to discover the position where he was trying to hold out. Just as the finishing blow was about to be launched, Grimm timely cast an ancient curse that blocked all of Hein's movements for a short time. Just as the 3 minutes passed, Rokugu fully recovered his physical abilities. Seeing herself at a disadvantage, Hein suddenly switched to negotiation, extending an invitation to join the demon realm with compensation 3 times their current rate, plus many privileges no one else enjoyed. Faced with this attractive offer, Rokugu showed extreme interest, even expressing goodwill in his usual humorous way. Just when the recruitment seemed about to succeed, Snow unexpectedly charged forward, delivering a fatal blow that caused the glowing gem to fall from Hein's hand. She immediately knelt down, begging to take back the stone, but Grimm keenly discovered it was a magic stone, a crucial catalyst that helps mages maintain fighting energy, and also a core component of the 4 Heavenly Kings' power. Knowing she couldn't lose it, Hein had to accept Rokugu's bizarre request to be an unwilling model for an artistic photo shoot directed by him. While she had to pose on the battlefield, her face unable to hide her suffering and embarrassment. Her subordinates standing outside didn't know whether to cry or laugh. When the humiliating photo session ended, Hein demanded the return of the magic stone as agreed. However, Rokugu broke his word, brazenly keeping the precious gem with him, even hiding it in a very sensitive location, making Hein blush purple with rage, yet still forced to retreat due to lack of fighting strength. That night, Rokugu's group held a celebration party with strong alcohol and lavish food. Having drunk too much, Rokugu was escorted back to his rest quarters by Snow in an almost unconscious state. While passing through the main corridor leading to the camp, Snow unexpectedly encountered the chief of staff, who held considerable power in the Grace army. He made an offer difficult to refuse if she would cooperate in providing evidence proving Rokugu was a spy. She would be allowed to return to the Knight's Order along with many privileges as in her glorious days. Although initially Snow had no intention of betraying someone who had fought alongside her through many campaigns, all her faith suddenly wavered when she accidentally overheard a conversation between Rokugu and Alice. What they discussed confirmed the shocking truth that they were indeed agents from another planet, sent to this world by the Kisaragi organization to serve a dark purpose. Snow's heart fell into a chaotic mix of emotions, as trust, feelings, responsibility, and reason clashed violently, pushing her to a crossroads difficult to choose. Although being discovered as a spy almost always meant death, Snow did not choose extreme measures against Sentuin Rokugu and Alice Kisaragi. Instead of escorting them to the execution grounds, she simply expelled them from the royal palace. This leniency somewhat surprised Alice, while Rokugu felt rather smug, as he was always the type to adapt quickly to adversity. With no official shelter, both had to temporarily rent a room in a residential area to continue existing in this strange land. From that point, the plan to activate the teleportation machine, a device to bring more warriors from the Kisaragi organization to this planet, became their ultimate goal. Nevertheless, Rokugu hesitated when thinking about the possibility of this place being conquered, because through his time here, he had begun to form a strange feeling called attachment. Alice, who was pragmatic and carried no weak emotions, announced that a division of the demon army was about to attack the Kingdom of Grace. Hearing this, Rokugu initially seemed very excited at the prospect of Snow, who had humiliated him, having to taste bitter defeat. However, when Alice calmly revealed the real reason behind the expulsion decision was that Snow wanted to protect them, as she had discovered their true identities early on and had been secretly covering for them, Rokugu's expression immediately changed. At this point, he no longer wanted to see the kingdom fall, but instead began planning to accumulate evil points to prepare for the major battle ahead. The irony was that evil points couldn't increase without performing wrongful acts. Therefore, at night, Rokugu secretly sneaked out, hoping to perform some intimidation tricks to cause social disorder, thereby accumulating more evil energy. Unfortunately for him, the first person he chose to scare wasn't frightened at all, and even pulled him into an unexpected situation that left Rokugu panicking. Before he could escape, Snow and Grim appeared in the role of security patrol. Noticing suspicious behavior, Snow immediately reprimanded him severely, while Grim curiously asked why Rokugu was no longer in the military, even though no one had publicly disclosed this information. Unable to admit being expelled for espionage, Rokugu made up a reason that Snow had harassed him excessively until he couldn't stand it. Moreover, he asked Grim to spread this information throughout the city, making everyone believe that Snow was the one who had made advances. As a result, the very next morning, rumors spread like lightning, describing Rokugu as someone who habitually unzipped his pants in front of others. Being rumored to be a pervert, he hurriedly ran back to the rented room to defend himself. But Alice calmly confirmed it, both mocking and acknowledging that at least he was trying for the mission. To prepare for confronting the demon army, the two decided to use guerrilla tactics, leveraging Earth knowledge about asymmetric defense strategies. In the silent night, they quietly went outside to dig holes on the crucial roads that enemy forces might move through. At each transportation point, the couple set up homemade mines to cause damage to the opponent before they approached the city gate. On their way back from the front line, Sentuin Rokugu and Alice Kisaragi accidentally encountered a crowd of citizens gathering, everyone's face clearly showing concern. When listening to their discussions, both quickly realized a serious crisis was occurring. It turned out that the hero who was considered the future savior of the Kingdom of Grace had suddenly disappeared after pursuing one of the high-ranking demon leaders, a member of the 4 heavenly kings known as Prowl. The pursuit seemed like a fateful turning point, but unfortunately, the hero encountered a special type of magic called random teleportation, a spell that transports the target to a completely random coordinate on this planet, where the probability of survival was almost zero. Some people believed this could be the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, saying that the Chosen One would undergo an extreme life and death trial, then become stronger and defeat the Demon Lord. However, according to Alice's analysis, the current situation showed that the trial should have taken place at the tower in the previous battle. But at that time, the person taking the main role wasn't the hero, but Rokugu, someone who wasn't in any legend. This led to an ironic consequence. Although they had repelled the demon army, they inadvertently took away the opportunity for the truly Chosen One to overcome calamity, making the kingdom's future extremely uncertain. Given the situation, Rokugu and Alice considered completely withdrawing from this place, as they felt their mission here was complete, although the result didn't carry much long-term significance. While the two were packing their belongings to leave, Princess Tilly's Centauria suddenly appeared. Her demeanor showed no resentment. Instead, she radiated calmness and resilience. Tilly's frankly said she knew Rokugu and Alice's true identities, understanding they were agents sent by an extraterrestrial power. However, she had no intention of capturing or interrogating them, as any punitive action had now become meaningless. The only thing she wished was for them to stay a little longer, to witness the final moments of the Kingdom of Grace, which might completely collapse in the next demon invasion. Tilly's wanted them to bring this story back, not as a battle report, but as evidence of the existence and courage of a small kingdom that desperately resisted overwhelming power. That night, Snow, Grim, and Rose also came to Rokugu's residence. Although appearing cold, Rokugu frankly advised the three to retreat if they felt they couldn't face the situation, as he and Alice would leave the next morning. Though not explicitly stated, his eyes contained silent struggle. When dawn broke, all remaining Grace soldiers assembled, not a large force, mostly warriors who had been defeated many times, but they still steadfastly moved forward with a spirit of fighting to the death. On the other side of the battlefield, two powerful demon leaders, Hein of the Flame and Gwyneth Wrecker, were leading a great army approaching the kingdom's border. The uneven battle seemed like it would end quickly, But at the crucial moment, the mine traps and buried bomb systems previously established by Rokugu and Alice detonated in sequence. The unexpected firepower from beneath the earth not only destroyed numerous gem-type combat creatures, but also disrupted the demon formation. The chaotic scene made Hein extremely angry when she realized she had just been trapped by someone she had once considered harmless. In the thick smoke of the explosion, the truth appeared clearer than ever. The person everyone had considered a burden was actually the reason the enemy had to step back. When the demon army approached Grace Castle, the situation became more tense than ever. Noticing the giant golems gradually entering the fortress, Snow immediately requested Grimm to cast a type of curse to hold them back. While Grimm was concentrating on channeling energy to launch the curse, Hein of the Flames suddenly appeared, directly attacking the sorceress who was casting magic. Witnessing this scene, Rose, who carried monster blood, immediately rushed out to block the attack for her teammate without hesitation. This created an opportunity for Grimm to activate a curse on Hein. However, the unexpected thing was that her magic was completely ineffective against the enemy's power, which exceeded control thresholds. Meanwhile, Gwyneth Wrecker had also entered the battlefield. He used his savage muscle power to grab Rose as she rushed toward him, grabbed her leg, and threw her hard against the wall, causing her to hit the thick stone and bleed. Pressing the advantage, he prepared to finish off Snow. But before he could act, Rose struggled to get up, burning herself with internal fire to stop the attack and protect her leader. At this point, Snow understood that if she stayed, she would be nothing but a burden. Under the urgent urging from both Grimm and Rose, she was forced to retreat to find a way to support Sentu and Rokugu, who was preparing to evacuate Princess Tilly's Centauria from the castle. However, when they just reached the basement, the group unexpectedly encountered Snow again. In that urgent moment, the warrior begged Rokugu and Alice Kisaragi to stay and save those at the front, even knowing that request might force them to face extreme danger. Rokugu initially refused, as he knew clearly that the current evil points were just enough to use the teleportation gate to withdraw. Nevertheless, when seeing the absolutely sincere look in Snow's eyes, his heart began to waver. Finally, Rokugu agreed to join the battle. He immediately ordered Alice to summon a high-tech sniper rifle for long-range support. However, an unexpected incident occurred when Alice announced that the accumulated evil points had been severely depleted because Rokugu had foolishly spent them on trivial entertainment items the night before, leading to the current situation where there weren't enough points to summon weapons. The situation now became perilous. Alice suggested an extreme solution. If he wanted to have enough points immediately, Rokugu would have to do something cruel that others would hate, thereby accumulating the missing points. Without much time to think, Rokugu decided to go back and punch the king a few times to achieve the goal, as according to Kisaragi organization principles, unreasonably harming vulnerable people would earn many evil points. However, Princess Tilly's and Snow immediately intervened, not wanting him to harm the elderly king. While everyone was still struggling, Snow suddenly made a proposal that stunned everyone. For the kingdom's survival, she was willing to let Rokugu do anything to her, as long as it met the standard of being considered evil in the organization's evaluation system. Faced with such a sacrificial action, Rokugu couldn't help but feel confused. However, for the greater good, he was forced to make a decision to turn the tide in a battle that seemed hopeless. In the crucial moment when Sentuin Rokugu was about to perform an action symbolizing his promise of attachment to Snow, he let nervousness take control, leading to an awkward accident where he inadvertently removed her last layer of clothing in front of everyone. Although the situation didn't unfold as expected, he still gained enough evil points to summon a modern sniper rifle with superior power. Not wasting time, Rokugu used the gun to take down all the golems attacking from the demon army. This powerful counterattack infuriated both Gwyneth Wrecker and Hein of the Flame, who immediately flew with their core henchmen straight to the defense line where Rokugu was stationed. A fierce exchange quickly erupted. Faced with the dangerous situation, Alice Kisaragi immediately supported Rokugu by activating the emergency summoning mode, bringing in a special melee weapon, a power saw that enhanced physical strength stats. Not letting the enemy have a chance to attack first, Rokugu roared, releasing all energy limits, then lunged like a steel tornado, cutting Gwyneth's body into pieces along with his minions in an extremely brutal way. In that rage, he couldn't even distinguish between enemy and ally, nearly taking Snow's life with his saw blade. Fortunately, she managed to dodge before things went beyond control. Hein, the only survivor on the demon side, stood still with horrified eyes. She didn't dare act anymore when realizing she was facing someone who followed no standards whatsoever. Instead, both sides agreed to a temporary compromise, ceasing hostilities for a month to stabilize forces and reorganize. As the smoke gradually cleared and the battlefield became quiet, Snow approached Rokugu with softened eyes. She placed a kiss on his cheek as a sincere thank you for saving the entire kingdom of Grace from extinction. In her heart, that moment made her believe something deeper than mere comradeship could exist between them. However, contrary to this expectation, Rokugu only saw her as a temporary entertainment item. He didn't nurture any serious feelings, causing Snow, who had just opened her heart, to become furiously angry. She immediately drew her sword and swung repeatedly at Rokugu in uncontrollable rage, as if wanting to release all the disappointment and hurt that was surging. Thanks to the overwhelming victory against the demon army, Rokugu and Alice were called back to the palace to continue serving this nation, despite their not-so-glorious true background. For them, the important thing now was that trust had been regained from those who had once scorned or doubted them. When learning that all previous dark schemes were intentionally manipulated by the chief of staff himself, Rokugu decided to personally return the favor to the one who had pushed him into deadly situations. In a private meeting, he didn't hesitate to use super adhesive tape to strip off the sparse hair remaining on that cunning old man's head. The scene was nothing short of a symbolic punishment, both humiliating the enemy and making viewers feel satisfied after a long series of dirty tricks were exposed. A few days after the battle settled down, Sentuin Rokugu unexpectedly received communication from the Kisaragi organization. The emotions suppressed over time made him immediately express dissatisfaction about the previous teleportation. Clearly, the success probability was below 50%. Yet he was still forced to become an experimental guinea pig, nearly losing his life in a strange space. While venting his anger, Rokugu deliberately made a bizarre compensation demand by forcing female leader Asteroth to marry him as a form of reparation, leaving the person on the other end stunned, not knowing if he was serious or joking. Setting that aside, the organization had sent a new assistant to support Rokugu and Alice Kisaragi, a tiger warrior possessing superior strength. From their first meeting, neither bothered with formalities, immediately challenging each other to determine superiority. However, Rokugu accidentally broke the sword he had borrowed from Snow in the very first exchange. To cover up the accident, Alice came up with the idea of wrapping it in cold rice and pretending nothing had happened, even though she knew it wouldn't be easy to hide. Just then, Snow unexpectedly came looking for them and asked for her beloved sword back. Faced with her expectant gaze, Rokugu spontaneously fabricated an emotional story that the sword had heroically sacrificed itself in a death battle against the demon lord, an explanation that seemed irrational but was delivered with such a solemn face that listeners couldn't distinguish truth from fiction. Snow, upon witnessing the shattered state of her expensive weapon, couldn't help but cry over the loss. However, that emotion was immediately replaced after the tiger warrior presented her with another exquisite katana. Receiving the unexpected gift, Snow immediately changed her attitude, joyfully embracing her benefactor. Ironically, that tiger man was only interested in young, petite girls, completely opposite to Snow's hot, curvaceous physique, causing her to be mercilessly rejected. That evening, the group gathered at a tavern to relax. During conversation, people accidentally learned that Rokugu and Alice's real mission was to collect information about this planet. Realizing this was an ideal time to learn about the native ecosystem, Alice asked Snow to guide them into the forest. In response, Snow agreed, and the next morning, the group began their exploration. As they ventured deeper into the dense area, they discovered a giant snake carcass hanging a characteristic sign, indicating this territory belonged to the Kakavaz tribe, a species that used primitive weapons to protect their domain. Before they could comment further, an axe blade flew past Rokugu's face, causing him to run away in fear, only to discover shortly after that he had lost his two companions. While wandering around trying to find his way back, a giant shrimp appeared behind him, causing panic to erupt again. However, this creature didn't show hostility and even bore obvious wounds, moving Rokugu to befriend it. Just as the friendship between man and crustacean was budding, Snow charged in from nowhere and sliced the shrimp in half, considering it perfect ingredients for cheese-grilled shrimp. While everyone eagerly picked at the meat pieces in excitement, Rokugu sat aside, regretting the relationship that never had a chance to form. Immediately after the meal, Alice and Grimm, who always believed in faith, engaged in a heated argument about belief and reason. Neither would yield, so they took each other outside to prove their points. Although not understanding why he had to follow, Rokugu still went along as if watching entertainment. To perform the deity summoning ritual, Grimm needed to kill a small animal, but lacked the courage. Alice substituted with another item and handed it to her, creating conditions for the ceremony to proceed. As a result, a humanoid entity appeared, a seductive demoness with a sensual body, declaring she could fulfill any wish of the summoner. Rokugu didn't miss the opportunity, immediately requesting to become royalty surrounded by beautiful women in exchange for his soul. Just as he was about to speak his real name, Alice discovered this was merely a three-dimensional projection rather than the actual entity, causing her to suspect it was a scam. Exposed, the demoness angrily attacked, but since Alice was an android, the attack was completely useless. When forced to fulfill a wish, Alice requested the creation of several planets inhabited by humans. The demoness immediately burst into tears, knowing she couldn't accomplish that. Not stopping there, Alice continued with another choice, requesting the elimination of all living entities on this planet, from monsters and demon lords to supernatural beings, but the answer was still impossible. Finally, she suggested helping fix a clogged toilet in the barracks. Unable to bear this humiliation, the demoness panicked, reverted to her true form, apologized profusely, then packed up and fled, leaving behind a group of people still shocked by what they had just witnessed. Amidst escalating tensions between countries and forces, Princess Tilly's of the Kingdom of Grace continued to strive to find ways to save her country, which was suffering from severe drought. Hoping to re-establish the freshwater source necessary to sustain life, she decided to activate an ancient weather control device to create sufficient rainfall. However, an awkward situation occurred when the machinery system required a restart password programmed by Sentuin Rokugu, a person notorious for his peculiar thinking and frequently bizarre behavior. The encoded character string he left behind not only carried offensive implications, but was also full of satirical elements that made all the court officials blush furiously when reading it. Despite considerable embarrassment, the technical team finally succeeded in decoding it, causing the rain-calling machine to function again, bringing salvation rain to the barren land. Immediately after, the group of warriors led by Rokugu set out toward the kingdom of Taurus, this time using a modern mechanical vehicle that he had recently acquired, a strange vehicle with an exotic appearance that astonished the native residents. The journey didn't last too long, as upon arrival, they were immediately given a grand reception, even being honored as messengers of peace. A lavish evening banquet was held at the royal palace to honor the delegation's presence, making the atmosphere exciting. While Rokugu and Alice Kisaragi maintained their usual calm demeanor, the other three members behaved in completely opposite ways. Grim continuously scanned her eyes across the banquet hall, determined to find a handsome man attractive enough to win her heart for the night, while Snow fell into a state of dreamy fantasy, nurturing the illusion of becoming a noble consort living in luxury. Notably, they all ignored warnings that the prince here was not only incompetent, but also had a slovenly appearance, with messy, greasy hair, a careless dressing style, and substandard living habits. Nevertheless, Snow stubbornly pursued her life-changing opportunity by approaching him, hoping her sensual figure combined with smooth words would help her score points. However, when coldly ignored, her dream shattered like smoke. Unable to maintain composure, she immediately shifted to an angry state, spewing bitter words before turning on her heel and leaving mercilessly. In contrast, Grim had not yet given up the game, flirting with a sophisticated nobleman without bothering to check his marital status. Upon learning he was already married, she flew into a rage, ruthlessly cursing him as if betrayed, though in reality, she was the one who initiated the flirtation. These awkward situations left Rokugu only able to stand with folded arms watching from afar, unable to intervene in the chaos caused by the three women. While the banquet hall began falling into disorder due to ridiculous arguments, Rokugu and Alice quietly withdrew from the noisy area, proceeding to infiltrate the palace basement with the objective of investigating top-secret information. In this remote location, they unexpectedly encountered Hein, one of the top leaders of the demon realm. Not wasting the opportunity, Rokugu acted swiftly, subduing her before she could react. However, just as the action ended, another character appeared, Kisaragi Hyoka, a powerful female warrior with enemy status. Without hesitation, Rokugu closed in, captured Hyoka, and conducted an interrogation using brutal methods, heavily tinged with the rudeness typically seen in him. Alice observed the entire process with eyes clearly showing excitement, as she always sought ways to encourage Rokugu to demonstrate his evil nature, thereby accumulating more evil points. Each time he behaved shamefully toward Hyoka, his evil index jumped, allowing both to achieve their own benefits in a strange symbiotic relationship. After extracting essential information, Rokugu and Alice returned to confront the Prince of Taurus directly. They presented evidence showing that this kingdom was secretly trading water crystals with the demon race, an action that could tip the balance of war. The prince didn't deny it but calmly admitted it, citing that the agreement was established to ensure fragile peace. Hyoka also appeared at the right moment to defend this stance, arguing that cooperation was the way to maintain national stability during chaotic times. Faced with this situation, Snow tried to turn things around by using her body as an advantage, deploying once more the seduction tactic. Not to be outdone, Hyoka joined the confrontation with her own cold allure, creating an intense beauty contest between the two women. However, the surprising truth was revealed when the prince turned out to have lost his physiological capabilities, making both women's efforts ridiculous jokes. In his suspicion, Rokugu couldn't control himself and suddenly performed an unprecedented offensive action, directly placing a sensitive item on the prince's head as a derogatory provocation. This outrageous behavior not only shocked the banquet hall, but also broke the diplomatic connection between the two countries. The Kingdom of Taurus immediately viewed this as a supreme insult, declaring the severance of all alliances with the Kingdom of Grace to switch to joining hands with the Demon Realm. The biggest loser was Snow, who had just recently been reinstated, now facing the loss of everything due to a mistake caused by her teammate. Foreseeing the approaching risk of armed conflict, Princess Tilly's quickly promoted war preparation plans. However, the prolonged drought made water shortage the biggest barrier in the defense effort. Therefore, Rokugu's warrior group was assigned a new mission to penetrate the harsh desert area, heading to Sand King's territory with the goal of seeking a mysterious fruit called water fruit, the only thing still capable of turning the situation around before full-scale war erupts. Immediately after receiving the new mission from Princess Tilly's, Sentuin Rokugu's group quickly set out toward the barren desert, a place believed to be the territory of Sand King, a legendary creature mentioned in ancient documents. With high determination to save the kingdom suffering from severe water shortage, they overcame the scorching heat to enter this dangerous area. After a short time searching in harsh conditions, the group unexpectedly discovered a bunch of juicy fruits full of water, the so-called water fruits, and they immediately gathered them excitedly into bags. Snow was extremely excited, believing that if she could bring these fruits back, she could redeem her honor and be reinstated after the shocking diplomatic scandal earlier. However, just as joy began to flicker, disaster struck. From deep within the sand, Sand King suddenly emerged with a gigantic form, a mole with steel-thick skin, sharp claws, and fierce red eyes full of killing intent. Rokugu quickly realized the horrifying truth. The water fruits they had just picked were actually living parts of this monster's body, possibly glands or biological cysts, helping it adapt in the desert environment. Upon realizing what it perceived as theft of its living organs, the giant creature roared, then charged toward the vehicle full of water fruits at terrifying speed, creating a devastating sandstorm. Faced with the approaching danger, Alice immediately ordered everyone to jump off the vehicle to preserve their lives. Not long after, the impact from Sand King completely buried the vehicle and the precious bag of water fruits in the burning sand, erasing all the group's efforts in an instant. Having lost their vehicle and supplies, they were forced to walk across the vast desert, hoping to return to the Kingdom of Grace before completely exhausting themselves. However, the situation grew increasingly worse. Despite walking for many days, the horizon still showed only yellow sand and hot wind. The group gradually became exhausted, with both spirit and physical strength falling into an alarming state, while food supplies were almost depleted. In this critical moment, the only thing left in the food bag was a few dried body parts of creatures belonging to the octopus tribe, which they had defeated earlier. With no other options, everyone had to use them as ingredients for meals. Rokugu strongly objected, feeling unable to swallow such a strange food, but the others didn't bother listening, even joining forces to hold him down and force-feed him a large spoonful that nearly choked him. That evening, Alice, who was an android but still retained some humanity, could no longer endure the scene of hardship and the prolonged atmosphere of despair. She proposed an unorthodox plan, encouraging Rokugu to use his familiar lowly tricks on Snow to accumulate evil points, exchanging them for the necessary energy to escape their current situation. After hearing this, Rokugu nodded in agreement, considering it a feasible solution. He immediately switched to action, but unexpectedly, Snow resisted extremely strongly, preventing him from doing anything beyond minor teasing. Utterly failing, Rokugu had to switch targets to Grim, who had fallen into a state of unconsciousness due to exhaustion. However, his efforts to earn evil points also proved futile, because the system didn't record bonus points when the subject was unconscious, making him feel extremely frustrated. In the following days, the group continued trudging on hot sand under the blazing sun, trying to move forward with the faint hope of finding a town, village, or any sign of survival in this dead land. Everyone was exhausted, while Rokugu began to doubt the real value of his antics, because no matter how hard he tried, if actions didn't meet the conditions, the system wouldn't recognize anything, leaving him with a sense of helplessness, both funny and bitter. After many days wandering in the harsh sea of sand, the group's situation reached a deadlock as clean water ran out, food supplies were almost gone, and everyone's spirit had nearly hit rock bottom. When everyone was exhausted, Snow, with a haggard face and whispering voice, proactively proposed a bold action, letting Rokugu peek at her goods to activate the evil point accumulation system. Although this behavior was quite daring, because she volunteered herself, The system didn't record any points, making all efforts futile. Realizing the situation couldn't continue like this forever, Rokugu began to think more seriously about the principle of point accumulation. According to his personal analysis, point increases only occurred when behavior exceeded moral boundaries or caused real psychological damage to others. Therefore, he vaguely proposed an idea to cross the line with Snow to do it once to push the system to the extreme. However, although hunger dimmed his reasoning, Rokugu was still sober enough to know that if he dared to actually do it, Snow would certainly not hesitate to cut his banana right on the spot. Before things went too far, Snow suddenly fainted due to physical exhaustion. Seeing a golden opportunity, Alice didn't hesitate to urge Rokugu to act, taking advantage of her unconscious state to increase points. However, before he could apply his familiar tricks, Rose, the half-beast girl with a cute appearance but extremely strong carnivorous instincts, suddenly appeared in an uncontrolled state. Due to extreme hunger, Rose thought Rokugu was a delicious prey and clearly showed her intention to take a big bite out of him. While Rokugu was mistakenly thinking this was a golden opportunity to get intimate with the girl, before he could do anything, Rose lunged at him, ready to tear him apart if he didn't react quickly. In utter panic, he threw Alice out to make space for escape. The life and death chase between a hungry humanoid creature and a mercenary who liked to do depraved things lasted all evening. Both punched each other, wrestled, and screamed in the dust, causing the entire area to become chaotic. However, this very confrontation unexpectedly helped Rokugu collect a large amount of evil points, as violent behavior combined with depraved intentions in emergency situations was recognized by the system as extremely malicious. With accumulated points exceeding the threshold, Rokugu quickly used them to summon a new transportation vehicle, a modern car that helped the group leave the desert and safely return to the territory of the Kingdom of Grace. However, the joy of return didn't last long as they faced failure in not being able to bring back any water fruits. Princess Tilly's, though understanding the situation, couldn't hide her serious expression when conveying new information. According to a secret source, the demon army was planning to seize an ancient weapon with terrifying destructive power that was sealed in an ancient ruin, deep in a forgotten land. She immediately ordered Rokugu and his group to depart immediately, stopping their plot before disaster struck. While everyone was still considering the danger level of the mission, Alice, who was never absolutely loyal to anyone beyond her data collection and point accumulation mission, developed her own plan. She wasn't much concerned about protecting the kingdom, but secretly planned to seize the ancient weapon for the Kisaragi organization, seeing this as the best opportunity to increase the power of the evil side while fulfilling long-term domination ambitions. With two conflicting objectives beginning to form within the same group, the upcoming journey to the ruins promised to be more chaotic than ever. While the high-level leadership of the Kisaragi organization was comfortably enjoying a luxurious vacation by the pool with a magnificent view, tables full of food, and music stirring the atmosphere like a festival, at the distant front line, Sentu and Rokugu still had to work tirelessly on an endless series of missions. While sweat had not yet dried on the forehead of the warrior pushed far from the safety zone, Lilith, the somewhat eccentric scientist of the organization, suddenly announced a system-wide live event, a popularity poll for outstanding members. Immediately, this event attracted all eyes, as the rankings displayed Lilith at the top, surprising many. However, this fleeting excitement didn't last long, as an internal investigation was quickly launched, revealing that she had hired temporary mercenaries to cheat in the voting. Under the guise of an entertaining contest, her action was justified by the reason that evil was the operating principle of the organization, making it impossible for others to rebut. Previously, Rokugu had created an intense competition when he accidentally pushed Hein, the female warrior controlling flames, and Rose, the girl carrying blood mixed with insect DNA, into a fierce confrontation just to gain an advantage in the popularity poll. Tension rose to the point where conflict seemed about to erupt right at the base, forcing Rokugu to organize a public vote to ease the situation. No one expected the final result would be an absolute tie, causing the two to be paired in an ironic way, becoming an odd couple that made the entire team keep a cautious distance, not knowing when the atmosphere between them would explode. Amid these chaotic events, Asteroth, the female leader with a cold exterior who always maintained an image of absolute rationality, began to waver when remembering the missions that Rokugu had quietly completed without demanding credit. Though outwardly she maintained an indifferent attitude, inside, a strange emotion appeared, making her hesitate before asking him about the person he had voted for in the poll. However, all private plans were quickly interrupted when the alarm suddenly sounded, bringing everyone back to the harsh reality. A group of strangers, presumed to be native heroes, unexpectedly landed near the resort area. Immediately, all senior members of Kisaragi shifted from a state of rest to readiness for battle. The situation became more urgent when a series of monsters shaped like giant grasshoppers rushed in from the other side of the battle line. In that chaotic scene, Astaroth didn't hesitate to charge to the front line, leading the counterattack with a desire to prove her combat ability and push back all doubts weighing on her mind. The party atmosphere was extinguished, replaced by the smell of gunpowder and the sound of clashing metal. When the encounter temporarily subsided, Astaroth tried to find an opportunity to ask Rokugu again about the person he had truly chosen in the voting, but he remained silent, avoiding as he had done every time before. Nevertheless, she didn't abandon her intention. While everyone was recovering from the clash, Alice Kisaragi began implementing the plan for the upcoming battle at the Kingdom of Grace, an area that was becoming the focal point of a large-scale conflict. Mel, the goddess who had granted Rokugu the ability to use evil points, unexpectedly revealed that she had deliberately not increased his points recently because she feared that if he achieved too much success, the reason for him to return to Earth would disappear. Alice's analysis clearly indicated that the army from the Kingdom of Taurus was about to ally with the demon forces to organize a comprehensive attack on Grace. In the counterattack plan, Snow, a warrior with tiger-human physical characteristics, who had been demoted for her habit of swinging her sword without thinking, was assigned to block the western wing where demons held command. At the same time, the knights in the Royal Guard would be responsible for stopping the regular forces from Taurus. Meanwhile, Rokugu would once again lead a combat team including Alice, Rose, Grim, and Snow, secretly infiltrating Taurus territory to seize an ancient sealed weapon, something believed to turn the entire war situation if it fell into the right hands. The journey ahead not only required sophisticated strategy, but also posed countless awkward situations, as this unusual group of warriors had to learn to cooperate in chaos, fighting both for the organization's ideals and searching for something far beyond their initial objectives. After agreeing on tactics, the group immediately set out toward the area where the ancient weapon was hidden, the strategic target in the upcoming confrontation. Throughout the journey, Snow constantly lamented about the embarrassing failure in the previous mission that had caused her debts to pile up. Seeing her depressed spirit, Six temporarily approved an additional small allowance to help reassure her. Alice at that point could only shake her head in exasperation, remarking that Snow was increasingly resembling a money addict to the point of being uncontrollable. According to her, at the current rate of excessive spending, the entire group's budget would soon evaporate completely. While the argument was still ongoing, the team approached the ruins area, a place occupied by the demon race beforehand. Here, they unexpectedly discovered that Yuki and Popine were already present, seemingly organizing a deep infiltration into the ancient structure. Snow, momentarily regaining her confident demeanor, proposed a bold plan full of tricks, utilizing the moment when the enemy forces were complacent at night to carry out a surprise attack, dealing with all demon forces before they could react. Her thinking had clearly changed, increasingly leaning toward cunning rather than her previous direct combat style. Alice bluntly suggested that Snow had perhaps been influenced by Six in her character, as she gradually revealed a crafty nature. However, Six rejected that proposal, arguing that although they were an evil organization, they still adhered to civilized conduct rules far more than that dirty type of action. Instead, he suggested the group should take time to rest, as a more feasible plan was to wait for the demon forces to go in first, letting them activate all the hidden mechanisms inside the ruins. Then, the group would just need to follow, safely passing all traps and finally seizing the weapon at the end. The next morning, the group silently tracked behind Yuki's army, going deep into the central area. It didn't take long for them to realize that this place was once an extremely advanced civilization, with clear traces of high technology that had once flourished but had been completely destroyed centuries ago. Snow, with her prominent money-loving instinct, immediately came up with the idea of collecting broken mech suits or robot parts to bring back for recycling, hoping to earn some money to pay off her debts. Alice could only glare at her without blinking, while Six maintained calm, closely observing the situation inside to determine the exact location of the ancient weapon they needed to steal. According to the plan laid out previously, Six asked the entire group to keep their distance, silently monitoring each step of Yuki and Hein, while the two tried to overcome a series of defensive mechanisms inside the ancient ruins. Not stopping there, Grim, the sorceress specializing in curses, was instructed to cast dark magic to hinder Yuki and Hein's ability to use magic, forcing them to consume a lot of physical strength during movement. However, Six's overly calculated and somewhat cruel behavior began to cause dissatisfaction among the female members of the group. Recognizing the risk of the situation falling apart, he immediately pulled out his wallet, skillfully proposing an off-budget compensation. As soon as they heard about the remuneration, the entire group swiftly changed their attitude, unanimously carrying out the original plan more enthusiastically than ever. As predicted, after much strenuous effort, Yuki and Hein finally found the area hiding the ancient weapon, something capable of turning the tide of war if it fell into the right hands. However, before the two could rejoice, suddenly from behind, Six appeared without hesitation, delivering a precise kick that exploded Hein's 2 gems, causing him to collapse on the spot. At the same time, Snow, Rose, and Grim coordinated to close in, immediately locking down all of Yuki's escape routes. Although Yuki quickly realized Six's entire insidious plan, from lurking behind to choosing the perfect moment to strike, it was all too late. Six intended to perform some evil point-generating actions on her to serve the organization's promotion system. But Alice suddenly alerted that Hein showed signs of stopped breathing after the fatal kick earlier. In an effort to salvage the situation, Alice gave Six a special recovery potion, enough to save Hein from the critical condition. Upon waking up, he was immediately forced to help Six unseal the ancient weapon that was sealed inside the center of the ruins. However, what no one expected was that Hein would take advantage of that moment to switch roles, activating the entire control system, thereby gaining dominion over this terrifying war artifact. During the chaos, Yuki managed to cast a teleportation spell to retreat, but Six quickly grabbed her bra before she could completely disappear. As a result, Yuki's sensitive part was exposed right in front of the demon crowd, making the situation extremely embarrassing. Right after that, the entire group quickly found a way to withdraw from the ruins, while the ancient weapon, now under Hein's control, began launching attacks to prevent them from leaving. The situation became urgent when the only exit was blocked, forcing the group to immediately devise a response plan if they didn't want to be buried with the remains of the ancient civilization. Amidst the chaotic situation, right after combat, Agent 6 unexpectedly took a dangerous blow from Hein. The situation immediately became disorderly. The white-haired witch erupted in extreme anger, resolutely vowing to destroy the entire opposing group to avenge that painful strike. In another corner, Alice Kisaragi was still endlessly arguing with Grim about the contradictions in their beliefs, paying no attention to the danger lurking right beside them. Meanwhile, Snow, the swordswoman who once bore the title of leader, was busy running around the battle area just to collect useless scraps, nurturing the hope of gathering enough assets to sell to reduce the enormous debt weighing on her shoulders. In the tense situation, Alice admitted she had previously requested the organization to lock Six's evil point usage rights, as she didn't fully trust his ability or his sobriety at that time. However, now, in this urgent moment, all barriers were removed as long as he could hold Hein back long enough for her to establish a transmission line with headquarters, activating the transfer of specialized strategic weapons to deal with the giant robot that Hein was controlling to attack. Without hesitation, Six stepped forward to the front line. Facing the tall iron machine, he decided to play a life and death gamble, spending all accumulated evil points to summon a series of heavy weaponry. However, the robot's super durable armor made all attack efforts with heavy artillery ineffective. In the brief moment to assess the situation, Six immediately drew out the weapon that had helped him escape many life-threatening situations before, a sword chainsaw hybrid. A fierce slash was delivered right to the leg, causing the left pillar structure to be torn open, creating an important turning point. Although not yet able to completely defeat this iron monster, that strike had made the opponent wary of the potential power he possessed, while opening an opportunity to reverse the chess game for the team. Just when the situation seemed to be gradually tilting toward the Allies, a technical issue unexpectedly occurred, causing the robot that Grim was controlling to become off-center, lose balance, and crash down, accidentally crushing Six. Seizing the golden opportunity, Grim immediately approached to prepare a finishing move. However, before things became worse, a spider-shaped combat machine codenamed Destroyer suddenly rushed in. This was the cutting-edge weapon that Alice had skillfully borrowed from the organization to deal with the special situation. Possessing superior strength with high flexibility, it easily swept away the enemy robot in just a few decisive strikes. 3 days after the incident, Six woke up from a deep coma. Confusion overwhelmed him when he realized Alice hadn't left a step during that time, even taking care of him attentively down to every detail. Although outwardly trying to appear indifferent, deep inside, he knew clearly that she always put the safety of teammates above all, never letting anyone be left behind in danger. Realizing that this area was still in a state of serious shortage of clean water, Six and Alice went to Grim's detention place with the goal of persuading him to support, as they knew well he had once held water system magic. However, the negotiation effort soon reached a dead end when Grim showed stubbornness, refusing to cooperate despite being persuaded in many ways. To resolve the situation, Six had to seek help from a special comrade, Tiger Man, a brave tiger person whose peculiar hobby was dressing up as a woman. thanks to his bold style, not hesitating to use unexpected and unpredictable tricks. He quickly made Grimm accept concessions, contributing to the effort of stabilizing the water source for this harsh land. Life continued to pass in a mixture of humor and danger, making each day in Six's journey in this strange world become a chain of irrational challenges but also full of color. Despite the main mission still being unfinished, he still had to continue enduring the chaos from his quirky harem, both fighting to survive and finding ways to integrate with the chaotic rhythm of life coming from all sides.